Welcome, welcome. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here from the International Mentoring Community, sharing a video that identifies what are the measures of success as it's linked to mentoring, the mentoring arrangement, the mentoring relationship. There is an exploration that happened with a group of people on a community conversation about mentoring, and this is the result. Please enjoy and make sure that you add comments to continue our learning. Somewhere around the video is a way to make comments, so we look forward to reading yours. Take care. So, what might be some of those measures that we can say that we've moved forward? Do you have any that you off the top of your head right now?
The measure of success would be, from a personal perspective, would be the behavior shift from having little to no self-esteem to now all of a sudden having a very high level of self-esteem. So watching and seeing that transition take place was a means or a way for me to determine, yes, I'm heading on the right path.
Okay. So I see, Buck, you have unfolded your mic. Did you want to share something?
Um, you did call me out a little bit. I was listening, and I was thinking of just between the business aspect and the personal aspect of mentoring and the mentee mentor relationship. It seems to be very transactional, and I like that we're talking about the part where you're not necessarily going to see the effects immediately as far as a bottom line with your business. And so on that very interpersonal level with a mentee and a mentor, you will see that the conversations change and that they evolve over time. Like Doug was saying about people or someone that he mentioned that gained confidence, or maybe their paradigm shifted to where they, and I'll use myself as an example. Did I think 6 months ago that I would be on a phone call with you guys right now? I didn't really think of that at the time, but now here we are. So it's that evolution, and it's transactional. The transactions that I've had with Doug have sparked more and more interest in the mentoring community in me, so that I want to delve into this deeper and deeper. So that's my 2 cents for now.
All right. So we're talking about measures. And so, Doug, you had mentioned this notion of there's a behavior perspective, there's a shift in a sense of characteristics, or like confidence was one
Yes.
way, right? Then Buck suggested something about there's a conversational evolution. And again, I would think that there's a perspective shift about involvement. He used the word evolution, all right? And I thought that those were two great ideas at this point. Did you have another measure that we might be looking at? Ross, I can share one.
Yeah, go while I mull. I got to mull here for a minute.
That's sure. Well, there are the typical measures, and let's get those out on the table. All right, you're supposed to meet for 6 hours. You met for your 6 hours. Okay, all right. Did we actually get anywhere? Well, that's another interpretation, but we did, from a measure point of view, we did have our 6 hours. Okay, or we did meet every Friday, and there wasn't any excuses why you didn't show up. Okay, because there was a full commitment. So you could look at it in that sense and report it. I'm talking more about mentoring in the workplace kind of program. Okay, so let's call that's an important measure. All right, in some regards. I think one of the measures for me is, and I'm going to go a little bit into what Buck shared, is this notion of the evolution of the conversation. Because When I, as the mentor, start to feel as though I am now a mentee because I'm learning something, whether it's the
Mm.
questions are being asked, the stimulation of the conversation, then, and I use this term a lot, head, heart, and hands, I feel as though there's something happening for me. That is glorious. I love that feeling. But how do you pop it up on a website and say, well, I just felt this, because it's a hard way to offer that measure, but it is something in myself that tickles me and gets me up and gets me going. It is a measure of success. It is a measure of evolution. It is a measure of value, whatever it might be, but it's sometimes difficult to go posting it, right? Okay, maybe you could turn it into a testimonial, right? You could talk
Mhm.
about it from that perspective. So testimonials are a way in which to bring the story out.
But I think that, I hear what you're saying, but I think where the success comes from is from the growth of that relationship. So at the end of the day, setting aside sort of the more, I don't know what's the best word, but it would be coming back, I guess, to the numbers. I to be honest, I look at success more so from the personal aspect of it. Is what did we both gain from this? So and I go into a mentoring relationship, excuse me, with the objective that I too am going to learn and grow, but sometimes I too am going to learn and grow perhaps more than the person I'm working with in that. So my mentee, uh, and I'm going to take away from that relationship some different things, and it could be stuff that deals with me personally. It could be with my mentoring practice, my approach to mentoring. It could be a number of different things. But I think that it's and that's something that you would take that step back and kind of take a look and say, I personally got value from the time I spent with whoever it is that you're working with.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that leads to hearing maybe later that the mentee stepped into being a mentor and stepped into it in such a way is that they could share the the stories of their own mentoring arrangement, mentoring relationship that they had with me if I was the mentor, and then to be able to have that conversation with them. Oh, well, I stepped into it, and I was doing it, and then you can use that to strengthen your own mentor arrangement, mentor relationship that you have at the moment, and it's sort of that's what I call the ripple effect. That's where community benefits and out it
Mhm.
goes from there. So there's an element of that truth that unfolds as well. Any others that you can think of at this point in time?
Well, the one that sort of just jumped to my mind right now is the idea of referrals. So when you get a referral so you've worked with somebody who then passes your name on to somebody else who calls you to work with them. I see that as, from our topic of success, I see that that's something that I could say, okay, I'm obviously doing the right things, or I'm meeting the needs of a certain group. um, Even like yesterday, I did a webinar for a professional group here in Saskatchewan, and at the end of it, the feedback that I got was very positive. So I viewed what we talked about over the course of the hour, that was successful as well.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, two people responded through LinkedIn. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read their responses, and I'm not going to edit it. I'm just going to read it and see if it stimulates anything in us that any of us wants to respond to. So this is a person out of Toronto, and they say that they're a mentee in a program. It may not give you immediate success, but the best way which can determine the success is that at least a mentee will be able to learn something from the mentor. In addition to this, if you have built a strong connection and you are in touch with him or her, even after finishing this mentorship program, then this would be another KPI, key performance indicator, that can determine the success of the program. So this notion, I think, a key word would be that the mentee learned something, okay?
Yeah.
And that they finished the program according to the agreement that was set, because sometimes you can close a mentoring arrangement because either the mentor has lost it in terms of their involvement, or the mentee has lost it in terms of their involvement. So there are those ways of dealing with it. So I can see that. I think we're lining up with what this person has shared.
And I just recalled my thought now was the idea of the relationship or the arrangement continuing on past the end point for the formal end point. And I think I look to that as well as a means to be able to say, obviously bringing value. So, all of those words that we would use to wrap into the success package to be able to say that it went well. So, when I look at a number of relationships, arrangements that I have, a lot of them are ones that have continued on over a period of time, some of which that have continued on past the end date of a formal mentoring program.
Okay. Well, then let me read the next one. And this is someone who has certification as a business architect, and that's in their explanation of who they are. And then they wrote, always thought that my goal as a mentor was to enable the mentee to stand on his or her own 2 feet with confidence. When that occurs, it's time to talk about taking a break, even if only temporary, in the mentoring relationship, to let that person shine and learn. That's kind of an interesting take. If I'm reading into that, is I'm in my mentoring arrangement. One of the measures is it's time to take a little bit of break. In other words, I think is to go get more experience on your own and then bring some of that experience back to our conversation. But to purposefully take a break, I think that's what I'm reading into this one. And I just thought it was an interesting twist on where we're going, and I had never thought of it from that perspective.
So here's what jumps to the forefront for me, that the response was very corporate focused. And so while we may have been successful in addressing the professional growth of the mentee, to take that break and not be there to provide that guidance and that support. And I don't mean from a telling perspective, but just to be cognizant of what's taking place, and knowing the right questions to ask to get us back on track. But what's missing, and this is what I find in a lot of corporate mentorship programs, is there's no thought about the personal side, the personal growth of the mentee. So are they dealing with, so yes, you may have addressed the professional side, but what about, are they experiencing anxiety? Are they experiencing stress? And if that gets in its way, that's going to act as an obstacle or barrier for for the growth that you think you've achieved on the professional side. That's going to be that obstacle or barrier, and it's going to either slow down or stop any development of their professional growth.
One of the thoughts that I had when you were reading the last comment was about, something finite, like taking a break, or, I guess too many times in a corporate setting, people they find a check mark. They're like, okay, we check mark a box. And they're like, okay, like you mentioned earlier, we've done our 6 hours, so we're good now, right? Okay, get back to work, or what, whatever the conversation is. And I think that it puts a rush, and it puts a lot of pressure on the relationship or on the mentoring program overall. And I would say that it might take away from the value, because the person that is the mentee is saying, oh, well, maybe they're saying, well, we're at 5.5 hours and I don't think I've figured this out, but we have a half hour left and I'm done, and they're going to kick me out of this program. And so then what do you have? You have a person that might just hold back and shut down. That was my thought when you were reading that section.
Great. And it's wonderful you mentioned about the checklist checkbox, because Doug and I, you could probably see our heads nodding and smiling, right? Because it's how a lot of people approach mentoring. And when you do that, that's when it doesn't feel like mentoring anymore. It feels more like you moved over into something else. And so thank you for using that phrasing. All right. I appreciate that, Buck. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So a couple of things struck me as you were talking, and one of the reasons I was interested in this formal process is I, as a mentor, or less frequently a mentee, I'm often struck by how little there is in the way of KPIs. So I'm really a big fan of having something to measure. And I do think there's two different ways to look at it. I think you can look at it organizationally. So are the people who have been in the mentorship program and were mentees, can we measure job satisfaction? Can we measure promotion? Can we measure the quality of their job reviews? So are there any external measures that the people who have gone through this program feel benefit themselves and that the organization can measure? From the personal perspective, most of them strike me, the ones to me that would be at the forefront seem very subjective in nature, which I think is okay, but also challenging. So to me, is there a goal setting process at the beginning? At the end of this, I would like to be able to, and I'm making this up, give a presentation without, sweating through my clothes, or be up for 2 promotions, or get a promotion, or throw my hat in the ring for something I was afraid to do. I like the idea of there being very tangible benefits that the mentee identifies they want to achieve, and then during the course of the relationship, what the mentor can suggest might also be tangible. I do think you have to do the subjective ones about confidence and feel better, but I'm very much in my work as a strategy consultant connected to outcomes. So to the extent that you can connect it to specific behavior that is measurable, I think that's really important, and one of the gaps I've seen in a lot of mentor programs.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I hear where you're going, Rachel, and I think it's really important, and that's why at the very beginning, one has to define what success is, define what measures means, define what the measure criteria are going to be, define how you're going to do it. These are all things that are required to unfold at the very beginning, just so that you have I use the word path map, you have the goal setting, whatever it might be. I so hear you in what's happening, but to Buck's point as well, is to be alert that it doesn't sort of fall into becoming a checklist and lose the true sense, what I call the essence of mentoring, right? So that's something I would just share back to you at this point in time. I don't know if that brings any more for you, Rachel, or Buck or Doug to add in. Again, it's a community conversation.
I think what you're saying is so important, that it not just become a checklist. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some happy medium between accountability and process. Yeah. When I first heard about this program and having gone through it and do a lot of what I call informal mentoring, it's very difficult to determine what the end is. So I think there's a balance where there has to be some sort of checklist, but that doesn't mean that there isn't also a personal connection focused on growth. I still struggle and would love guidance on when do you know it's over? You know, I heard both of the participants say something from the perspective of the mentee, but from the mentor, you know, obviously there are formal programs, there's 6 weeks, you meet, you know, once a week, whatever it is, all the different models that people have. But is there a way at some point to say, we're done, we've accomplished what I think you need to accomplish, and moving forward, a different mentor would be better, or, you know, we're doing great, let's continue, and here are the new objectives that we're going to set.
Mm-hmm.
So I think where that all falls into is the what I refer to as the 3 phases of a mentoring relationship. So the first one is to build the trusted relationship. The second one is then I call it learning and development, which is where all the heavy lifting in the relationship takes place. But to speak to what you're talking about, Rachel, I think the third phase, which is the maintenance phase, where we're not as actively engaged in meeting on a regular basis and stuff, it'd be just a simple touch point to be able to say, how are things going? And you could set that up so you maybe start off. I do it with some of my folks where I touch base once a month just to see how they're doing. And then we mutually agree to start to push that out a little bit further and a little bit further. But that never prevents or precludes us from circling back to the second phase, which is learning and development, because there are some issues, challenges, opportunities, and that we maybe need to work on as part of the journey that we're on together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we're aiming towards the top of the hour here, and one of the things that I think would be great is if each person was to just share a key learning, or which could be in a sense a summary point, all right, around this this notion of if mentoring matters, what's the measures of success? How do you know you've achieved the mentoring? You've accomplished it, whatever words we might like to use here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shout out your name. Thanks for watching the video. We have an ask of you. Make sure you click the subscribe button and click the bell beside subscribe so you can receive more notifications of the videos that we're loading up. And like the video, and especially if you could comment your insights. We would enjoy learning from you. Take care.